Are we all back?
I'm looking. I think Jamie's out. Yeah, I think we're waiting on Jamie.
You what? I'm sorry?
I think we're waiting on Jamie.
Okay. I see. I think I see everybody else.
Don't forget to adjourn.
Yeah, at this time, we'll adjourn the special meeting by unanimous consent. We're still waiting on Jamie. Jamie's here. We got everybody, I think, Nancy. You're on mute.
Okay. All right. Since everybody's here, we'll call to order the February 22nd, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. First thing up is items from the Director of Finance.
Good evening. I have one piece of legislation for you. This stems from two different components that are related. One is the adoption of GASB 84, which is a new standard we were required to adopt in 2020, which basically gave new definition to custodial funds. We reported these previously as agency funds, and then auditor estate guidance associated with that GASB. Basically, if it's no longer considered an agency fund under this statement and is considered another type of fund, we need to make sure that we're budgeting for it. There were a few that the auditor estate agreed for a cash basis or budgetary basis could stay custodial, even though we report them differently on the financial statements. So these were the two funds, Fund 838 Recreation Scholarship and 860 Developers Escrow, that no longer meet the definition of a custodial fund under GASB 84, and which the auditor estate is requiring we adopt a 2021 budget for.
Okay. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
So, okay, so on for first reading, and then no need to come back, and then consent agenda. Okay with everyone?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. You write that? Okay. All right. Thank you, Joanne. Next, Department of Technology.
He's on mute.
Hey, Kevin.
Okay, any questions?
I have one quick one, Nancy.
Sure.
Kevin, can you help me for my own edification? Are the schools requesting that the line going to the former building be closed, or is that still happening, or you were just adding two new connections? Okay, and so I understand. Thank you.
Kevin?
This is for middle. You mean middle school south? Okay, all right. So these are two new for the new Lincoln Elementary then. Okay, all right. Okay, Karen.
Yeah, how do they pay for this? Because I don't. Thank you.
Are those monthly or annual? And that bond repayment is what, the cap cost, or is that, what is that bond repayment? What's it covering?
Karen, do you have another question?
No, no, I don't. I just wondered because it would appear to me that if they were building a school, that they should have been putting in that on their own. But I just wondered. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anyways,
Yeah,
yeah,
Nancy.
I'm sorry, what?
I
So,
think I got a hand up, Nance.
oh, I didn't see it. You know, it blends into your background.
That's right. That's right. Now, the girl from Delaware with the orange hand up there. I know as a member of CIC, we're talking right now that we're running out of fiber and those kind of things. Is this is this a dedicated line? Is this something that's already?
I am pretty sure these are not CIC strands.
Okay, that was my question. I know we're running short on CIC strands, and I wanted to make sure that, because I mean, those are premium and those kind of things, and so, okay.
Any other questions or comments?
So you said the bond is repaid in 28, but the contract goes to 31. Do they still continue to make that same payment after 28?
Yeah,
For the additional 3 years, okay.
yeah, the structure is that the cap was bonded for the build out. They're repaying for the build out. They're paying a maintenance. There's really no charges or anything like that involved.
I have another question.
Sure.
On other buildings that will be coming to Gahanna as we get our economic things moving forward, and that, will we be asking all of those people, all of those particular people coming in to build something, that they put their the things in the ground originally, so that we don't have to make sure that things like that happen? For instance, the Crescent, will we be asking them to bringing fiber as part of their part of getting their particular thing happening? Because there's so much going on in that technology area. Is that something that we're going after?
And again, the CIC, I think, would want to provide them with that and then charge them for it, yes.
Yeah, I would hope that that would be the case. Yeah. That's smart streets and smart city things that we're trying to get done. So thank you. Just check.
Yep.
I would also say, I know one of the things that Dr. Goss was helping us do before she left was to really establish an overall fiber strategy, not only for CIC, but for the city as well. And she had connected us with at least 2 consultants that, with the goal that we could create an overall city strategy. So that's something that we're working on right now too, because I recognize the importance of that and how the city strategy would align with CIC's, because that's an important revenue stream for CIC.
Yeah, I obviously CIC was the beginning of this, and
If I have one question, if the bond is done in 28, so they won't be paying the larger amount after that, but we've been paying it all along. So wouldn't it make sense that they still keep paying it, since we've been paying it all along to provide it in the first place? Or am I looking at that wrong? So they're not paying $14,000 just for these 2 strands. That's 14 for all the strands they're using. Oh, okay. I thought it was just for these 2 that they were paying 14. Okay. All right. Okay. That makes more sense. Thanks. Okay, so no other questions then. First reading. Do we need to come back, or can we just put it on the consent agenda?
they want it to be second reading.
Oh, they want it to be
Want to wait a second. And
Yeah.
emergency.
an emergency. Is everyone okay with that?
I'm fine.
Does that go?
Regular agenda for emergency, yeah.
Okay, so that'll be on the regular agenda. Okay. I forgot about that. Okay. Okay. So next we have other discussions.
There are, well, go ahead, Nancy.
Go ahead.
There, in any case, there are 4 items to under the other discussions or council discussion items. One that I put on is just initial discussions around returning to chambers. Thoughts from council members about that. If anyone has been in City Hall, There are petitions between splitting all of the seating positions within chambers. The seating within the room is separated, but we are still under the city emergency legislation that we passed, and obviously the COVID situation around the community, or the country as a whole, hasn't resolved. But rather than sitting on last minute, I wanted to bring it up and just get any thoughts around timing and whatnot among the members of council. And Mayor, any input as well?
When the snow is gone.
Conceptually, and again, just ideas, April, or is that people not, is it still too early for that to have that discussion? Just looking for insight where people want to go.
Hey, Brian, this is Mike. So I appreciate you bringing this up. I think our crystal ball is still a little cloudy right now, though. I'm sure I'm not the only one that ran across that Wall Street Journal article. I think that said something about April time frame. There could be a significant portion of the population could either have already had it or could have received the vaccination. I've heard other dates thrown out to say something like 90% of the adult population could, again, be in one of those two camps by sometime in May. I would just suggest that maybe we put this on the agenda for a month from now and see if those forecasts look like they're coming to fruition. If any of those two look like they are going to manifest, I mean, I would be fine with going back in chambers personally, just speaking for myself.
I missed a little bit of what you were saying, like 2 sentences ago. If something pans out?
So there's I guess obviously it's uncertain. So that's the key thing to keep in mind. Yep. But there are people that are, qualified to opine on those things. And yep. This is not me, right? I'm just regurgitating what I'm reading. That are saying that a significant portion of the adult population could fall into one of two camps that we'll just broadly call immunity. Either A, they've had it before, meaning COVID, or they've received a vaccination. And that these and that these populations could be sizable enough by April or May, that we could maybe revisit that as a body and decide if we're comfortable enough with going back. But I think to put a date on the calendar right now might be a little premature, till we can get some more clarity on as to whether or not those forecasts that are being stated by others do in fact come true.
And that's fair. So let's.
I think that end of March to look at it again. My daughter is a nurse, and I know she's not an epidemiologist or anything, but she said the room they've had swirling things about that there's one of these variants may spike in March, and so they're kind of looking at March as maybe another spike. So that would get us past that time frame, if it would.
I have to do this because my hand thing's not working.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry. It is kind of working. You're doing a thumbs up, I think is what we're saying.
I was trying to get, it won't stay up, and it's doing all these other things, so I'm going to have to do this. Sorry.
Your hand is right behind my bar there, too, on my screen. So go ahead, Mayor.
I actually just wanted to piggyback on that time frame. So we are planning to keep City Hall under the same operations as we are right now, closed to the public with limited access through March until we can get some folks vaccinated. We're still trying to work on getting our police vaccinated and getting some folks here as well. Mifflin Township, as you may have heard, was just late last week announced that they are going to be designated as a vaccination site. And we had an exchange today with Franklin County Public Health Commissioner Joe Mazzola to schedule a meeting with the Mifflin Township officials and myself as well to talk about a short-term and long-term strategy for how that gets rolled out within our community. I think that will also impact what we do here and our ability to do that. But to echo what Councilwoman McGregor said, I think everything that we're hearing is indicating probably sometime April, more likely May, is when I think we'll probably reach that comfort level to be open things up a little bit more. But right now, I know we're looking at keeping our remote work situation and the limited access at least through March until we can get some vaccinations happening within the community. And certainly amongst the team here, we want to make sure that our employees are safe for folks who are coming in here too.
So with that, I think what I would do is ask April to put this on as a discussion topic for the March 22nd meeting, the second committee meeting in March.
That sounds good.
Okay, thank you. The next item was.
I'm sorry, before we wrap on that, could I make a comment?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, it's okay. You guys are moving pretty fast. So I appreciate this, and I think that I'd like to, certainly support and understand that we need to make progress, especially as the numbers suggest that it's appropriate. I would like to urge us to consider how to continue to include constituents electronically, whether it's a constituent attending virtually or if there's some way to integrate technology. And I hope that'll kind of tail into our later conversation. But my hope is that if people are quarantined or if we have a spike, that we're able to go back to a remote and maybe hopefully go back and forth if necessary. I understand we may be limited by open meetings rules as the legislature allows us to meet remotely.
Yeah, so a couple of things to that. One is the legislation that's passed by the state, I think, is that currently, can somebody go on mute? Does that currently expire end of June for end of July, something like that? Is the current timing of the state legislation?
I think it's the end of the year.
It is the end of the year? Okay. And so that may or may not change as well. And then we do have some discussion around technology coming up here. That's another item that's on the list here. So,
Hey, Brian, real quick, just to kind of put a bow on this, right? So the article that I'm referencing, to be clear, it's a Wall Street Journal opinion piece, but it's written by Dr. Marty McCary, who is the quick bio that they give at the end of the article, is a professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and Bloomberg School of Public Health, chief medical advisor to Sesame Care, and author of The Price We Pay. And the name of the article is "We'll Have Herd Immunity by April." So again, it's just one estimate that's being thrown out there by people that are well more qualified than myself, that are pointing to the April-May timeframe that the mayor mentioned also.
thanks, Mike. Next item is we as 100%, not 100% clear on the steps to this, but we have an appointment to the ESID board. And assuming I looked up the correct detail of the acronym, that is the Energy Special Improvement District board. And just a little bit of background, some research was done. I think that was April. It may have been the administration did some of that. I honestly don't recall. But typically these individuals are involved in the administration and are representatives of the community. I want to say one or two or three in the region are economic development directors and or have roles similarly within the economic development realm of the community. And so the topic here is getting to a place where we determine what our appointment is, and I believe there's legislation to formalize that that's required.
How many people are on the board?
I will defer to the mayor.
Yeah, let me pull it up.
I want to say it's either 5 or 7 off memory, but
It's so
it's only one appointment from us.
Yeah, correct. And then the mayor has an appointment, council has one. And then I'm trying to find the email. Every municipality that is participating in the ESID would have those appointments. So I'm going to say maybe 6, maybe 8.
And I'm sorry, I missed one thing. I thought there was one appointment for the city in its entirety. You're saying there's one from the mayor and one from council?
That's my understanding. I don't know if Mr. Malarski's still on here, or Gen 6 might be on the line while I try to find this email.
If I can, I believe that the mayor is appointed and you can name someone in your place.
Right.
And council also picks somebody.
There you go.
That's how I remember it, but for some we've done this, I could be wrong.
The mayor is the representative or her delegate, and then there's a community there's a person that council puts on as well.
Here we go. I Actually, there's more. 1, 2, 3, 4.
If it's a MORPC or regional board, then I would expect it maybe actually be fairly sizable.
Yes, I'm sorry. This is Jennifer Six. It is sizable. But we are not our own ESID. We are part of the Columbus Energy Suburban. So we are one member of a much larger body. But because we have chosen to become a member, then now we have a seat at the table and have voting rights.
Right. So I'm actually looking at the list of membership that was provided to me at the end of last year in 2020. And in some jurisdictions, one person is designated for both seats. Perry Township has one seat. Marble Cliff has the mayor and a council member. City of Columbus has a senior policy advisor and the economic development manager. Worthington has a city council member and the assistant city manager. Dublin's economic development manager, and actually two economic development people. Bexley has the mayor and a resident. Hilliard has a city council member and the economic development manager. Grove City has the economic development manager and only one position that's holding both seats, so to speak. Whitehall has its economic development manager. Sharon Township has one of its trustees. And then a representative of MORPC is on the board. So that gives you a flavor for who else is currently serving on the board.
How often does the board meet? Like monthly or quarterly or?
That's a good question, and we are so new to this, I don't know.
No, that's okay. The board is required to meet at least once a year, kind of as a formational board, but then they meet as projects come about. So I don't know exactly how Columbus ESID works. Either they're subject to call, or my guess they probably have some sort of monthly or quarterly meetings, because these do need to be approved by the body.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I guess one of the items that I'm not clear on is, do we have a date that we need to do this by? And what is our level of priority? And where I'm going is, Mayor, if you've got some thoughts about an appointment, council members, if we have thoughts about an appointment, how do we get to one? Is that something that needs to be done at our next regular council meeting, or do we have a couple of weeks, months, whatever, in order to get that position filled, to get at the table?
Yes, I am not aware of another meeting scheduled at this time. So they did have an organizational meeting earlier in January, but we did not have an appointment to that, so we missed that meeting. But there is not a meeting scheduled that I have been advised of yet. So presumably there is no deadline at this point.
Okay, so quick, but we don't have something that's giving us a hard date.
Right.
And then, do you have thoughts with regard from the administration? Do you have thoughts on any recommendations or ideas for appointee?
Well, actually, my recommendation would be Jennifer Six. She's going to continue to work with us as part of our economic development team. She is the reason why we had the ESID established in the first place. She was the one who connected us with this project and the idea to create an ESID here and the concept of PACE. So she is the most knowledgeable out of any of us to understand how this works and what that implication is. So she would be my recommendation.
Only question I have is structurally, Jennifer is a contractor as opposed to an employee.
Correct.
That's really would be my fundamental question.
Sure.
The other appointees, are there any other contractor type relationships of any of the others at least that you recognize?
There is, again, I don't know what their relationships are. I mean, there is, I don't understand the difference between that and a resident. If you're going to appoint a resident, that's the same type of relationship. I mean, MORPC is a director person. There's a senior program coordinator for property owners. I'm not sure what that role is. And I don't know if Jen can give any insights onto that as well. And, the idea would be that she could also hold that seat until we hire the permanent development director as well.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Mayor. They are assignable and transferable. I don't believe it requires legislation because I think there's an automatic alternate built in, but we can double check on that for you so that we don't have to come back to reassign.
I didn't follow the no legislation required piece. You mean to do a reassignment if an individual is hired as an economic development director?
Correct. Because it would be the position of and not an
I see.
actual.
That would be the legislation. The legislation would be the role or the acting. Okay.
Right.
Correct.
Council. Council's thoughts on if there's no other direction or concerns, then it would make sense that we would ask April to draw up legislation for the acting and or employed director of economic development.
Yeah, I have no issue with Gen 6 or her successor if we get one.
You want somebody that knows what it's all about from the very beginning.
Okay. There's 2 items remaining. I'm going to go to technology as the next item. And actually, before we close that out, April, did you get that note? And then we would have that on for our next regular meeting.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Kevin and I have had several conversations. Kevin, I think you're still on. We've had several phone conversations. We met inside chambers. We've had a variety of conversations around technology. I think there was the initial discussion, and no intent to lighten it, but the initial discussions and focus was specific to cameras. And my concern is anytime, and it's not a technology concern, it's just a general concern that a singular event drives a singular path of doing something. And it just oftentimes we don't step back and say, as an umbrella, what are the best things that we need to look at? And so it could simply be camera pursuit, or it could be a broader spectrum from things that we really should be looking at. And so that's kind of where Kevin and I started this conversation, and want to bring council in and get perspectives of everyone on council so that we can get a path forward. And the important part of this is there is potentially CARES dollars that we can take advantage for these things, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a hit to our regular budget. Where'd my notes go? There's essentially 4 things that seem to make sense as far as areas of focus. One is just our general, and some of these may have cost, some of these may not. They just could be trying to make some changes in how we do things. But one of these is our fundamental ability to use the tools that we have. Specifically, that's our iPads. Kevin and I talked about my own personal frustrations. I think other members of council have had some frustrations with how the tool is set up and how it works, and understanding that the intent was to make it easier to manage and support for us, but the trade-off seems to have gone, from a perspective, seems to have gone way too much in one direction as opposed to and being helpful for us as users of the product. The other is the ability to leverage, again, what we have and or what we may go to in the future. Historically, the reason we have an iPad solution is because our technology was Legistar, and Legistar was dedicated iPad. They didn't have any tools associated with other applications or other hardware. And so that's what drove us to the iPad. Today, that's what we have. We want to take best advantage of those pieces of equipment and also be able to migrate as we move forward to handle both how we use them, but also how we can help the community engage with us, et cetera. Some of the things that we talked about is that we are very limited from from a back and forth, able to present and able to show information. Yet we have these tools in front of us that are certainly very powerful. But when it comes to how we are connected and how we can show and or how we can receive information, we're limited. So how can we best take advantage of that? The other one is with regard to the dais. The physical build itself obviously makes it difficult for people to feel engaged and or participating in any way with the with us when we're in chambers. It's just I think we've had many conversations over the years of if there's a way to improve that. And we haven't necessarily made a progress on a bid, so to speak, because the concept's very high level, but essentially lowering that in a cost-effective manner so people can see us, what we're talking about, what we're just that whole interaction standpoint. And then the share or the presentation and the video is the other piece of interaction, both being seen and also being able to, the public being able to engage with council in whatever appropriate fashion. So that's my like 5-minute overview of all of this that we're talking about. Kevin, I don't know if you want to maybe bring some other perspective to kind of our discussions, and then also get input from council as far as critical pieces, other questions, et cetera.
Yeah, so if I may just quickly add, when we thought about the camera project itself, we did build the camera project, and as we presented to you guys, I think in either November or December, we were proposing a scalable project, or a start to a project, if you would, that we can grow with. So the first logical step is giving us the ability to continue to live stream, like we've already kind of touched on to a certain degree. It's awfully hard to give residents the ability to participate in these meetings virtually. And when I say participate, it's even just watch, right? But participate in these meetings, and then all of a sudden us come back into chambers, and now the only way for them to really participate is to come in a room that might be crowded, that for their own personal reasons they might not want to be in. So that might be difficult. So the second part there is, thinking about how do we manage and maintain that, but then moving forward, how do we build on the experience inside of the room, even, and giving you guys, like Mr. Lyric said, the ability to present from any position at the dais. Creating a projection system that is not 1998-ish, and more modern, and give you guys literally the ability to hit a button, and next thing you know, your iPad is being displayed up on the monitors. So that's how the project was thought about. It wasn't necessarily presented in those ways. But whenever we begin to think about an IT project, we always think about it, not necessarily for tomorrow, but for 3 years from now, 4 years from now. I will also say, just while I have your ear, that the longer we go in not making a decision on the camera project specifically, the harder it will be to maintain the live stream aspects when we do come back into chambers, because there is a 90 to 120 day kind of not waiting period, but from the ability to order equipment, get it in. This equipment is under high demand at this particular point in time, because we're not the only government or place, for that matter, that wants to do something like this. So there is a timing aspect of this all as well. So, that's pretty much all I think I can add at this particular moment.
Mike, do you have a question?
Well, I was just going to, not so much a question, but I'll just express support for, I guess, expanding the scope of kind of what we've been talking about with regards to technology. There have been times in the past where, as council members, we've wanted to share information, bring in an exhibit or something to that effect. And, we've been relying on an overhead projector, and in some cases that fails. I would say it's time to probably get with the 21st century, and it would be nice to have something, if we could have like a stylus pen or something like that, and you could even circle certain features on exhibits instead of kind of pointing to the, trying to reference in words the color coded section on a map or something to that effect. If you could just simply circle it and point to it and say this section here is what we're talking about. I just think to make it, I guess, more plain, it would aid in our ability to communicate and come to, I guess, beneficial decisions if it was clearer what we were talking about, instead of all of us looking at our own individual iPads. If we had the option to, I guess, flick our screen up on the larger screen for the sake of discussion when we get back to chambers.
And that's all. I mean, that's all very doable with what, even with the device that you have in your hand. It may need to be unlocked a little bit, which is what Mr. Lyric and I had been talking about. Was not eliminating some of the, well, reconfiguring the MDM system that the iPad currently is restricted by, and making it a usable product for you. I don't necessarily know why or how, but those are past decisions, and we can always revisit things. But the technology it really just needs to be unwrapped in some instances, and enhanced in others, and that's the nice part about where we are at this particular point in time.
What do we need to do to move? Oh, Stephen, you have a question.
Nancy, please. I mean, I was just going to add to the discussion, but if you want to go ahead.
I was just going to say, what do we need to do to move forward? I mean, we have the discussion. What do we need to?
Well, I was going to make a suggestion on that. So
Okay,
I could.
Go for it, Steve.
Go for it.
All right. So, Brian, I think, so first off, I want to start saying that I'm just like Mike Snetzer. I'm totally supportive. I think this is good. And Brian, I think you hit the very high level pieces and parts. And so to Nancy, where she probably was going is that now in terms of priority, what should be first, second? I don't think we can do a lot of these in parallel, or if not, correct me. We do seem to have, based on another discussion, a semi time frame of when we're going to be back in chambers. And so this engagement, this carrying the virtual with us to chambers needs to be a priority. Figure that out. What that is, figure that out. You know what I mean? So it's going to be the details of that, right? And then the tools for engagement from council members, like Mike was already suggesting. I think that's the next thing that we should be looking at. I'm excited about the prospect of tools of engagement for the public. The ones that, whether they're in chambers or not, how are they going to engage with us? I think we got some really some cool things that any of us, probably in these 7 or 8, counting the mayor and Kevin, that we can actually dream up. But I think we just need to put everything sort of in a terms of priority. What is it that we expect short term, medium term, and long term type of thing?
And if I can just add to that, I'm sorry.
One, let's see, quick thing. One is understanding overall cost, and separate from implementation timing and project planning, et cetera, but just of this, what's the scope to understand total cost that then gets us to where we are. I would say it appears that our funding limit is effectively the CARES limit is where I think we're expecting, as opposed to additional costs at this time from council. I think downstream in other years we may look at expanding and spending more on it. But right now I think the limit is in all likelihood, I would think, again, it's up to us as a whole, but is roughly whatever that estimated amount is from CARES funding.
Yeah, so the only thing that I would add to Mr. Renner's comments were that when we take into consideration the virtual the camera project, the first project that I proposed, the installation of cameras is not just simply for you guys to necessarily be seen and for us to stream well, but it also includes the virtual element of the meetings as we are currently having the meeting. So just think of the Teams meeting as a fourth camera, if you would, 3 in the room and then 1 virtual camera of the Teams meeting where other folks could participate via Teams and still be, like the development proposal from last week where all those folks are virtual, but all you folks are inside of the room together. There are those types of options. And without doing that first project, getting you guys the ability to whiteboard, if you would, from your iPad is really secondary. Because you guys want to have the ability to whiteboard from your iPad, but also have that go out over the internet so that somebody watching through YouTube could actually see what it is that was going on in the room at the same time. So when we logistically work this thing out and spec it out, the first phase is the camera project. And I apologize, I could probably keep referring it to as a camera project, and it is really more than that. I'll try and adjust that, but I get stuck in my ways sometimes. The other part of that, though, then the second part, in my opinion, would be the projection system. And then in tandem or closely thereafter is the reconfiguration of the MDM system so that your iPads function more appropriately for what it is that you guys want to do inside of the room. As far as shortening the dais and stuff, that's kind of that's not an IT project. That's a facilities project. So I'll pass that buck.
Karen, do you have a question?
Actually, I just have some comments. We've come a long way since we couldn't get our microphones to work. So we now can do things virtually and have our cameras coming here. And I honestly think it's really, we need to spend the monies because we will have them if there's one thing that's a good thing, COVID has brought this so that people can, the consumers can see what's happening. So I think it's certainly a good use of that funding. And I think if we saw it was like 75,000, 95,000 for the various payments. But if people will feel like they want to come and join us and they don't want to drive to City Hall, that's a perfect opportunity to have our constituents watching and giving their views. Now, there's 35,000 or so people in the city of Gahanna. We cannot please every view. So what we do, that's why we've been elected to make these decisions. I do think that we should move forward on this. We got, this, when we first built City Hall in 1994, I believe it was, this was really, beautiful. We had everything we needed. And then we found out that our microphones weren't so good, and maybe this wasn't so good. And when we needed iPads, we needed laptops. We're moving forward. This is a time when technology moves as fast as, one day to the next, we got something better. So I think we should take advantage of all of it. I think that it's a right thing to do. People will be, I believe, happy to be able to hear us better or see us better. Do I think that we should be taking down the dais? No, the dais typically is high like that because it's to protect the people that are behind it. Because I don't know if you noticed that there are some things that happen that could be bad. So getting down to that lower level, it's hard for people to see then, whatever. But I just feel that doing that, getting higher chairs would make a big difference because the chairs are all low, and I know I can't be seen. But if you had a higher chair, it might be better. Anyway, that's my thoughts, and I think it would be a wonderful idea to move forward on this now that we have the time to get it all put together.
Marissa.
Yes, thank you. Kevin, thank you so much for speaking with us. I wanted to circle back to your presentation from December 14th at our Committee of the Whole. I was trying to pull up the PowerPoint that you shared with us, but I don't think I have it. So I'm trying to do this from memory, so bear with me. But one of the pieces that you mentioned that I thought was really important that I haven't heard come up yet tonight is about developing written policy and rules around participation, use of technology, et cetera. I guess I certainly do not want us to forget that. I had a great conversation with Council President a few weeks ago, and one of the points that I think we agree on is that having clear rules and clear expectations helps level the playing field so people can participate fairly and equitably. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that because I think that is critical to having a sustainable program. Even if we don't get it completely perfect the first time around, I think we need to make the effort and make an attempt. There have been, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the concern that I share with some constituents that have raised about how some people have access to participating by video and others don't. And I think that is a huge barrier, and I am requesting that we make sure that we address that particular issue so that anyone who's speaking before council has the ability to participate in an equitable way.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think that in some instances it's we implement technology and we don't necessarily understand what the human impacts of it is, but having the ability to address both of them at the same time is paramount. Yeah, and I do think that creating that uniform standard, like you talk about, and just giving everybody an understanding. This way, it goes from being opinion to being policy is important. And then guys like me, then I'm not operating in a gray area of, well, I don't know what to do. I can only make it work as best as I can, and then leave it to well, hope I don't get yelled at, right? But and that's where if we can the more gray area we can eliminate, the better. I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I said we don't want you to get yelled at.
No. Well, and ultimately it's and I know this better than you guys might think, but ultimately it's you guys have to field those calls that basically say, well, this is what the technology is doing or isn't doing, and it creates tension, and obviously my goal is to eliminate the tension, not add to it. So, and I know that's everybody on the screen right now, that's their goal and objective too.
It would be lovely to get to a place where we have one meeting where we don't get at least somebody complaining about the technology. Even tonight, your audio wasn't working on YouTube for a while, so I hope we continue to improve.
The challenges, sorry, Mayor, I just want to real quick, the challenges that we face on a weekly basis to make sure that this happens seamlessly is, and it doesn't happen seamlessly, I'll be the first to admit that, is quite the challenge, to the point where last week I was the one driving between home and City Hall to make sure that it worked, because it wasn't. And that's, it's unfortunate, but that's also another reason why it needs to be addressed, because the way in which it's duct taped together at this particular point is very challenging and taxing on us all in order to make it function.
Actually, Kevin, that's what I was going to ask you to speak to, which was the interplay of Legistar with everything else. And other organizations that are doing virtual meetings right now don't have that Legistar components as we do. And I know that Kevin and I had a conversation earlier today around what those challenges present when you're trying to kind of tape all of these things together, as he just said, duct taping it together. And we're doing the best that we can to make sure that we are open and transparent and that are to these meetings. But certainly to be able to have the equipment that is needed within the chambers to continue a high level and to create a higher level of service for residents. And you have to keep, the point I was going to make earlier is you have to keep in mind that even assuming there's a consensus and we reach a point in April or May to resume in-person meetings, there will still be people in our community who are going to be reticent to do that, probably for a period of time, a year or more, until there's actual, we can officially say COVID-19 is gone. And so we want to maintain that level of access to council meetings for those people who still aren't going to be comfortable coming in person, even when we all may reach a point, or you all may reach a point when you want to do that. So to be able to provide that in a consistent way that without interruption and a high quality is something that, I know we want to help you achieve for that and help you get there. And I know Kevin's just trying to get some ideas to what the priorities are that you want to do so we can get that ordered and get that timeline going for you.
I would just, whatever you can, anything can be done to lower that dais down, I'm in favor of it. Get rid of that, because people can't see. It looks like little top of your head. Some of us, they can only see the top of the head. So if you can take that whole upper part down, and I'm for it.
Yeah, I think on that topic, if we can maybe, is that Grant or is that John? If maybe just an eval and a quote.
I was going to actually ask Grant to speak to that because I know he took a look at it.
Yeah,
I was gonna say they've looked at it before and said, "Oh, it'd be so much," but I'm telling you, it's just from the people sitting in the audience, it's very much a barrier to hearing. What you don't realize how much your understanding is, not only seeing your mouth move, but also hearing. So,
yeah, it's certainly doable.
We want to make sure it's done right, and it doesn't look like someone came in there with their chainsaw and chopped it off. So it's going to need I guess a high level design to make sure it works. It is an interesting structure in how they put it together. So it's not as simple as cutting it through the middle. So if you would like us to get a quote for a design, we can look at that. And then of course it would have to be budgeted in the future. We just don't have funds for something like that.
Well, the thought is with regard to ability and people able to engage, and does it fit within the construct of the CARES funding? That's would be the ideal.
I know Joanne and I discussed that briefly. I think if she's still on the line, I can't tell. I think it would be challenging because of COVID. I don't know that there's anything directly, I can speak, related to COVID for that. But we can look at that. But the other thing I was actually going to ask Grant is, my understanding from our conversation earlier is that there might be an easier fix rather than trying to level the dais itself, would be to shorten the counter space that's there, because part of the problem is the counter is so wide, so you have the dais or dais up so high, but then you're sitting that far back, which compounds it. Whereas if you maybe shorten the countertop, that might be an easier and more economical fix that would move you closer to help solve that problem.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was just gonna say, if ever a time that you do take a chainsaw, I'll volunteer to be the first.
Demo day at City Hall.
I'll take the first swipe. But I never thought about lower or narrowing the counter would push you forward, which would give you the appearance of being closer. So maybe there's a half of, we could do lower at half, and then that also, and maybe between the two, we can achieve the results.
So in short, if you can investigate a couple of options and maybe, I don't know how long that would take, what people's availability is to do a review, but maybe come back next meeting. And I think the same thing goes to the technology component is a little bit more formalization to timing and dollars and plan. And let's talk about it next meeting and see where we can get to.
I'll do my best to get you some information for next meeting, but I highly doubt that's going to occur. The industry is really stretched thin right now, but we'll do what we can to get some ideas as soon as possible.
And then on the technology side, where the vendor is in the process of quoting the projection system, I already have numbers on the camera system itself. So I should be ready to go next meeting, no problem.
Should we would they give us, provide an ordinance next time so we can get moving on it? I mean, to allocate the money or enter a contract, or is that?
I mean, I can offer an ordinance for next meeting for sure.
Okay.
Has there been any discussion on, for instance, if we come back putting plastic or fiberglass of some sort between the council members, and
it's already there.
That is done now?
It's already there.
Installed that.
Yep, it's in the 70%.
Dublin did that. Now they were able to get that with CARES dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 70 council and separation between city attorney and mayor.
Oh, that's great. The other part being the use of cleaning things after we're finished.
That's been done as well.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah, great. And we just don't wipe things down. We bring in a fog. They come in and fog after we have mayor's court. And the only people who are in there for mayor's court is about 5 people at a time. The magistrate, the bailiff, prosecutor, the defendant, and the defendant's attorney, if there is one. And that's it. And we bring them in one at a time. The other thing to think about is the chairs within the chambers itself. We still have the limit of 10 people. I believe that state order is still in effect, and we'll probably still have social distancing requirements. So we actually placed the chairs earlier today. There's about 14 chairs that can fit within the chamber, all still being within 6 feet apart. So keep in mind till you have directors come in as part of presentations, that's also going to limit how many members of the public can come in too. So again, the live streaming component is just as much important even going forward because of the limit you'll be able to have within the chambers.
Absolutely. So, thank you.
And then moving on to another topic, an entirely different topic. This is back to, we've obviously had a number of interactions, community interactions, questions with regard to code enforcement within the city, and looking at where we are, what our expectations are as a community, what are the steps, I guess, and what your insight is and thoughts are with regard to code enforcement in our current situation or status, I should say, maybe not situation, but status, and where we want to get to.
So that's a whole lot of questions. We actually had prepared a presentation. Michael Blackford, who certainly will be taking over the director of planning in the new planning department that we have created. So he will be overseeing code enforcement. Has officially been doing that since last April, but certainly within the last 3 weeks since the departure of Bonnie Gard, who had overseen code enforcement for the last 15 years. I think he is really, over the last 3 weeks, has given him an opportunity to see into code enforcement. I understand there's not a particular appetite to see a lengthy presentation from the administration tonight. So unless you want to see that, we'll forego that and try to address the questions as best we can. I think we've all recognized that there are challenges and I would say opportunities around code enforcement. I'm very much aware of the concerns the council has received. I've been, I think, copied on many of the emails that you have received. I've received emails as well. And I think that it reinforces our commitment to ensure that every one of our departments is operating as efficiently and effectively as it can, and that our employees are set up for success. I think every department here has opportunities for improvement, and I think they always will, because if we ever get to the point where we arrive to work one day and decide that we're doing the best that we can and we don't need to make any more improvements, then we've already fallen behind. We're always going to continuously strive to see what we're doing, what are we doing today that we can do better than we did yesterday. I think code enforcement of all the divisions of operation that we have here at the city presents the most opportunities for it. And again, I know Mr. Blackford's on this line here, and I'm going to turn it over to him in a minute to talk about maybe some of the concerns that have been raised and some of the challenges that the division sees right now in terms of our staffing and where we are there. But what I will say is certainly over the last 3 weeks, it has really given us an opportunity to peel the layers of the onion back in this division. It is a division that I think has had opportunities for many years. And whenever you have new leadership that comes in, it's an opportunity to re-examine how you're operating. And what we are really doing with the division right now is tearing it apart all the way down to the studs and rebuilding it. And I'm going to get ahead. I'll let Michael talk for a little bit because I was probably going to take some of his thunder. So I'll let Michael speak to some of the concerns I think that have been raised and what we've been doing to address those.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So sort of some of the concerns that I've heard from the public, there's probably two main concerns regarding code enforcement. And specifically, those are in the areas of consistency and sort of the lack of or need to with regarding follow-up there. So those are sort of the main areas. I'll take those one at a time. Lack of consistency being that again, maybe inconsistency in some of our staff interpretations. It would be fair to say that the direction of administration and supervision changes over time, and that will lead to difference of interpretations. And I will say, lack of consistency, part of that has to do just with the realities of that we have in years past, there's been one full-time code enforcement officer. This year we have two, and I'll talk about those staffings. But when volume is up. The reality of it is there's only so much officers to go around, patrol, 12 and a half square miles and 36,000 folks living here. Some of the other area that we've heard some challenges with would be the lack of follow-up. That's really something that we own, and that's something that we're working on now as a team to improve. There has been additional coordination between departments. We're having increased meetings. We're going through our list of code enforcement cases, and we're starting with our oldest ones, and we are touching those on a regular basis. And again, the goal of code enforcement is to gain compliance with whatever code or regulation that is, that we are enforcing. So we are going through, and we are, as a team, like I said, working on diligently going through our expansive list of complaints and going forward with them. Some of the challenges that we're having as a department, a lot of that has to do with staffing. Again, we have 2 full-time officers today. Thankfully, our furloughed part-time officer, who's been off for almost a year, started today. We are in the process of trying to fill our additional full-time officer that's been budgeted for this year. We are also evaluating the recent departure. We're evaluating that open position. We're looking at the job description. We're evaluating that. We hope to have that posted here as well. So due to the volume of cases, which at this point through early February, we're on pace for about 2,800 code complaints. That's about twice as many as in the year 2019. So we need additional staff in order to investigate those complaints. So workload definitely is a direct reflection on our ability to have that proper follow-up. To that point, we are evaluating our standard operating procedures. We have those in place. We're evaluating them at this time to see if they're appropriate with the timing of just exactly how long do we give folks to comply before we send out notices, how long to comply to notices. Like the mayor said, we're really, taking this down from the ground level and reevaluating and rebuilding based off of what our current desires are. Another one of the challenges that we face are that code enforcement deals with a wide variety of complaints. And some of those, fortunately, are very, very easy for us to deal with, like long grass. That's very easy for us to evaluate, and usually it doesn't take that long to get compliance. Some of these issues are a little bit more complicated, such as drainage. We're uncovering that. May or may not know that we have drainage covered in several different places within our various codes. And some of those codes don't actually say the exact same thing. So there is some challenges that are brought out by our code consistency or lack thereof. So we're evaluating that. We are rewriting this year the zoning code. That will help some, but there's a lot more codes that code enforcement has to enforce. So the Band-Aid approach that we've taken over the years is not really what we need now. We need these code overhauls that will help. We're coordinating with our subject matter experts because lo and behold, a lot of these codes don't rest in the code enforcement world. They involve other folks like maybe the city planner or the chief building official or the city engineer. So they're subject matter experts that we are getting direction on, and then code enforcement, being the interface with the public, is moving forward, getting those folks compliant. So we're doing many different things in order to improve over moving forward. Again, staffing, we've restructured the department, or the division has moved to the Department of Planning. We're evaluating the standard operating procedures. We are engaging right now really on weekly meetings, touching the existing code enforcement cases. We have software that's been in place for a few years. It's great if you know how to use it. We've had some turnover, and it's a great opportunity for us to get retrained on our software. So that'll help improve the external customer experience along with the internal customers. Again, we're working with departments on some high level items there with what the code means and how we apply that moving forward. We're evaluating those standard operating procedures. We're getting new timelines in place, ones that are appropriate, because again, part of the concern is sort of the lack of follow-up. That's on us. We control that. Yeah, that's a little high level overview.
And I'm going to piggyback if I could. Look, I think that Michael, thank you for providing, as you said, a high level overview for that. I really think this boils down to what we've identified are the 3 Ps: philosophy. What exactly is the purpose of code enforcement, and what do we hope to gain from it? Our processes, and then the people. That would be the staffing component. So Michael's touched on staffing. I'm going to take them in reverse order because I think it's easier that way. So from a staffing standpoint, as he said, we have 2 code enforcement officers, 2.5 as of today, bringing back our part-time furloughed code enforcement officer. We are in the process. The code enforcement position is a civil service position, so it has to go through civil service testing. The written test is actually scheduled for this weekend. We have a few civil service positions that are open right now that were budgeted, and civil service tests will be administered this weekend. The oral test, I believe, are scheduled for early March. And then we expect the interviews would be late March to early April. So it's our expectation we would have a 3rd full-time code enforcement officer on staff by May 1. That's kind of an internal deadline that I've established. So that would help us with a staffing perspective. And to give you some perspective, in looking at comparable municipalities of our size, Westerville, Hilliard, Grove City, that would actually make us the largest code enforcement staff out of our comparable municipalities. I think Westerville has a zoning administrator, an administrative person, and 2 full-time officers. We would have 3.5 code enforcement officers, a planning and zoning administrator, and also administrative support, which is, I think Michael might have skipped over that. We recognize that, the lack of follow-up, that requires some, I think, administrative support. So from a staffing standpoint, I think we will be well positioned, certainly within the next few months, to start to be able to better maintain and handle the volume of complaints that we're receiving. And then obviously the goal is to eventually move to being proactive. And the goal of code enforcement, of course, is voluntary compliance. But before I get there, let me go to processes. So Michael mentioned our standard operating processes. The ones we have right now were written in 2018. We're looking to revising all of those to make sure that they are reflecting the needs that we have right now. He mentioned training. Once we are fully staffed with the full-time code enforcement person to be hired later this year, we will do retraining of all of our staff on our software, Llama, because I think we've recognized that the system could probably do a little bit more, and not just code enforcement, but our building and zoning folks as well, because we've realized that it can probably do a whole lot more things than we're giving it credit for, and our staff needs to be fully equipped, because the more that they are trained and able to utilize the software we have, the more efficient that they will be as well. I think Michael sold himself a little short there on the regularly scheduled meetings. He's starting to have those, the purpose of which is to make sure that follow-up is being conducted, because we've recognized that as an area of opportunity, to make sure that when we visit a location, and it's okay, usually it has to do with cutting your grass and weeds, but you go out and you say, hey, you got a complaint, you need to cut your grass and weeds, we're going to come back in 5 days. If it's not cut, we'll cut it for you. Making sure that we are out there in 5 days and making sure that we are following up on the notices and the warnings that have been given. I think that is probably one of our biggest opportunities. But I think the biggest opportunity of all, and the one I hope we can have some discussion about tonight, might be the philosophy of code enforcement. What it is that we hope as a community to have code enforcement actually be. In my estimation, and again, open for discussion tonight, but code enforcement, I believe, was created to enhance the overall community that we live in, to make sure that the aesthetics are where they need to be, that we don't have rundown properties, that we have people who are maintaining their properties, and that one landowner is next to a property, that is being equally maintained as that person is, so that we actually have a quality that's maintaining its values. At the same time, we have to decide, is code enforcement Is it going to be a gotcha tool that's used where we are micromanaging people and it's pitting neighbor against neighbor? I don't think we want that. One of the things as I've been contemplating code enforcement is the Geico insurance commercial with Cynthia, the homeowners association, and she's going around and she's chopping down people's mailboxes because they're 2 inches above code, and I mean, is that the community that we want to be in, where we want to be so consistent that we're not recognizing that sometimes there are gray areas? It's not always black and white. What exactly do we hope to achieve from code enforcement? Michael mentioned the drainage complaints that we have, and that is really creating some particular challenges for us. We've received 127 drainage complaints just so far this year. And the drainage complaints in many cases have to do with houses that perhaps were built before the code went into place. There may be situations, and I'm not saying this is the case. Understand, I'm giving hypotheticals here, but there may be situations where perhaps the drainage situation is not creating an issue for the homeowner or for an adjacent property owner, and it's perhaps a substantial fix for the homeowner. So are we going to put a price tag on a code violation that isn't causing any harm to anyone, that existed before the code went into place, in order to achieve uniformity and consistency, and yet affix a huge price tag onto somebody who might not be able to afford it at a time when people have lost jobs with COVID and they're just trying to make ends meet? What is it that we're hoping to accomplish? So, it's from that perspective, I'd love to hear council's perspectives as we work internally to try to figure out how we make this division work the best way that it can, and make sure that our staff is getting the appropriate directives and directions that they need to enforce code. Ultimately, as a community, and as the elected leaders in this community who are here to represent our constituents, what do you want to see code enforcement ultimately to achieve? What do you see the role as being? Because I think that will really help us as we work through the processes that we need to put in place.
Years ago, well, I don't know why there's an echo. Is there an echo? Ben Hale, who was a developer and attorney a long time, he's passed away, but he came in and said, you might think that I object to the strict standards you have to build in Gahanna at the time. He says, I never mind standards as long as they're equally enforced. He said, if I'm going to make an investment of several $1 million, as long as I'm assured that the next guy on the next lot is going to be held to the same high standards, he says, I don't object to that, because that's good for my building, that's good for their building. And so I think that is somewhat translatable to code enforcement in general, is that I think people just want to make sure that the neighbors are held to the same standards, and that it's good for all, not oppressive standards, but just the same general standards that, they're all going to be required to maintain the same standards within a neighborhood. Yeah. And I think people just want to know that if there's an issue that they see as driving down their property values, as long as the standards are the same across the board, then they'll be okay with that. And that's what I would think would be fair.
No,
Consistency is huge. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I would just think consistency is huge.
Yes, I agree. And I was sorry, that I agree wholeheartedly. Certainly, as an employment lawyer for 30 years, you get in trouble when you aren't consistent. And having consistent and equal application of anything is what is going to create, I think, a community that everybody feels welcome, but they know what the expectations are. And when you have the issue is when it's enforced against one, but not against the other. And I appreciate that.
I think, just to chime in a little bit, I think, Mayor, you made some really great points about the goal being voluntary compliance, and really thinking about what is it that we're doing to our neighbors, for our neighbors. What's the culture that we're creating through code enforcement? And I think that's a really important point. It's one thing to want everybody's yard to be cut at the same level, at the same height of grass, but it's, but do we lose some of the uniqueness, and do we lose some culture, and do we lose some identity if we're too strict, or maybe not strict isn't the word, but we don't have a range of what's acceptable. So I guess I worry about, I was contacted by a woman, not even in Gahanna, over the summer, who was complaining about her butterfly way station wildflowers being cut down by her municipality. And because it was not in line with code, and it's a municipality that I think is known for being a bit stricter with their aesthetics. So I would hate to certainly see us lose the ability to look at things maybe in a bigger picture, while still, yes, being fair, being equitable. And I know that's tricky, and I know that's a gray area. I'm concerned at the increase in the calls. I think that, we've got to find a way to get neighbors maybe helping each other, talking to each other, to avoid this from being kind of, I know it's not exactly a law enforcement issue, but we certainly don't want it to be escalated into where we're penalizing people financially if they're in a position where they can't do the work that they need to do. So certainly looking at this through a lens of compassion and sort of community empathy as well.
I know Michael had referenced earlier, some of the code challenges that we have. So, as we're going through some of these things, we have outdated code. And we're enforcing things that really just don't make sense sometimes anymore because of when the code was written. So that's a problem. We have code that conflicts with other portions of the code because we've done these Band-Aid fixes throughout the years. So now we have one code provision conflicts with another code provision. And is there some way that we, as we work our way through certainly the zoning code and then through other portions of the code, are there things that we can do, we need to add that currently aren't in the code? Are there things that we need to take out because we don't need them anymore? And how do we actually make it perhaps easier to achieve compliance, and then for our code enforcement officers to enforce that code? I think those are all things that we have to look at. That's why I said this is not, when I started out and said those are big questions, they're not easy fixes here. These are things that have evolved through the years as code enforcement itself has grown, and our code has grown. We need to take our time and as we try to sort the way through this to make sure that we are fixing these things in the best way possible.
Yeah, I was wondering if I can jump in here. So I'll start off by saying that I'm happy to hear that we're kind of staffing up, for lack of a better phrase, when it comes to code enforcement officers. And Madam Mayor, I do appreciate that metric there that says basically once this is built out and everybody's trained, our staff will be in fact well above the norm. So I think we can all anticipate some serious progress with that, those boots on the ground. For the Seinfeld fans among us here, there's an episode where George Costanza, after being wronged in his eyes, utters the phrase, "We live in a society." And I think what George was getting at there is that, there are generally accepted standards of behavior or, presentation or whatever, or however you want to describe it. I don't think anyone here is asking every lawn to look like a golf course or a putting green, but, peeling paint, detached gutters, I think are broadly seen as unsightly, generally viewed as negative. And in some cases, there could be issues of public health, whether it's, dilapidated structures that are housing wildlife or, overflowing dumpsters in some cases. But rather than kind of speak more, in concept, I do want to address some of the issues that have been directed my way. And I think they can be separated into perhaps two broad categories. One appears to be technology challenges. Things like fees tracking, particularly surrounding permits. I admittedly do not know how that operates. Data entry seems to be another recurring issue. There's some issues with some reported issues with the interface, which ultimately feeds into another example of a challenge, which I think is database integrity, is probably the best way to describe that. And so, to what degree do records accurately reflect the problems on the ground? So, just a couple of examples there, and I'm certainly happy to take this conversation offline if it's getting too far down in the weeds. But the system that we have, I wonder if it perhaps needs to be evaluated. If there's any way that it can be improved through updating some things. And then the next broad category are process challenges. And these are things like maybe conflicting definitions. There could be something within our own code that we need to correct. Council may have a role in that. And then I think there was mention about like consistency, and I would describe it as probably the room for discretion, or the allowance for discretion there. It's one of those gray areas. I can understand where there perhaps needs to be some of that, but it also is riddled with some downside when people feel like there isn't a uniform standard across the board. So those are kind of the high level things that I would hope that as we're doing a deeper dive here that would be taken, I guess, a closer look at.
I appreciate all of that, and I know those are things that you and I have discussed, Councilman Schnetzer, and they're on the list as well. I think I know the software has been interesting, because I know we've had some concerns raised about information missing or being taken down when in fact it is in the system. So trying to understand why it's not showing up, I'm not sure, but that's certainly something that we have to look at with the software itself. I think that you talked about permitting and tracking the fees of that. I think that's where administrative support will help with that too. And again, I just think also adding to the staffing will help tremendously. I know Mr. Blackford talked earlier about, when you have 2 people versus 3.5, that's a big difference in the ability to handle the volume that we have. And when you're not handling so much, you can start to pay attention maybe to more of those finer details that sometimes slip through the cracks. I'm not saying that's what happened. I don't know, but I know it's an area that we've identified as well. And it's on the list of things that we're trying to identify. How did that happen, and what do we need to make sure that doesn't happen again?
So would it make sense to, maybe you had mentioned, Lori, a presentation, but would it make sense to maybe give you some time, give Michael some time, revisit kind of the presentation and progress and observations, kind of that with a little more specificity, not necessarily at the next committee meeting, but the committee after. So like 1 month from now, whatever that date is. Well,
again, I think 1 month from now, we're still going to be waiting to hire another person. So I don't know that a lot's going to change in 1 month. I'm happy to provide updates to council. I don't know that it's going to be 2 weeks or 4 weeks from now, because we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of complaints that just are, 2 people, and now we just today added the part-time person. So we've got to make sure our staffing gets up. Michael mentioned the job description for the planning and zoning administrator, that was finalized last week. Hopefully we'll get that posted tomorrow. It's my fault it wasn't posted today. I forgot to email Miranda with my approval. So hopefully we'll get that posted today. So I'd like to kind of get some other things in line in terms of staffing before I commit to doing another update. I'm happy to do updates as we go along and keep you guys apprised. But I think right now we're still delving into what some of these issues are. But the first and foremost that we really need to address are our staffing levels so that we can start to handle the volume of complaints that we have right now. I think we have 270 some complaints, 273 or something right now that's just through the first 33 days of 2021. That doesn't count since February 3rd through now that have come in. So we've got our hands full. We're just trying to keep up with those, but I know Michael's having his regular weekly meetings with them, and I think as he continues to have those, he'll gain more information and more insights that we can better position us to be able to come back and give you some updates as to changes that we're implementing here.
Mayor, would an intern be of help to you during the summer, for instance, in terms of putting the code together and working on that code? Morpsey, of course, has some still available. Would that be of some help?
I know we don't have one in the budget.
So
I-
there's,
Yep.
there may be some help there that would make this come about in a faster time. It may not, but you might think about that.
I don't know. I
We
can
talked about this, so I just thought I'd bring it up because of the fact that if you have more people working on it, then it probably would be. I'd like to mention permitting. To me, permitting should be done in a no longer than 30 days or something like that. That people, I can remember going for signs when we were when running for office, and it taking very long when I had been on council for 20 years, and it was like it took five days to get my sign when my sign was always the same. So I mean, just that is, to me, I went, this is kind of silly that we have to do this when
Sure.
So I think permitting is something that business people want. They want to be able to get it in a fast order.
Right. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And actually, you remind me of something else that we've identified in terms of a challenge, and that is just even educating the residents as to when they need a permit to things.
Exactly.
There's I needed a shed. I needed a permit for that shed. I didn't know that. Or, I want to hang a sign in my yard. I didn't know I needed a permit for that. So how do we educate the community around things like that? And I actually had a conversation with a resident shortly before council tonight who suggested that as we start to get near the summer months, that we maybe do a little video where we're like, hey, if you're planning on doing some yard work or putting in a patio or putting in a deck, don't forget you need a permit for that. And if you're going to put in a pool, you're going to need a permit for that. If it's this, and just trying to share some information with our residents that way too. That was a great suggestion. So we'll be. Karen Wester, if she's on this line, put that on your to-do list. We'll be talking about that too.
Getting information out to the is the thing that's important. And when I get my Rocky Fork Enterprise, I'm always surprised when there's hardly anything in there about Gahanna, and it's coming to me. So I suggest that we get with our Rocky Fork Enterprise and ask them to be a little bit more, showing what's actually happening in Gahanna rather than what's happening in Plain City or something like that.
I'll pass
it's really makes me very sad when I open that paper and there's virtually maybe one article in there about Gahanna. It's not right.
There's a lot going on here. It's okay. We'll get the news out. We'll get the news out one way or the other. So.
That's why I'm asking you. We should make our own paper. We should just probably do that.
Yeah, there's a great article that just came out late this evening on a surgical center going into the Crescent. So that's in Columbus Business First. That actually the link was just shared with me while we were on this meeting.
We want people to see that we're actually doing things like that. And that we knew that from when we were at our last meeting. It's wonderful to see that for those particular types of economic development going in.
Yeah, our communications manager was on it. She sent me the link. So, sorry, we digressed.
I could digress more. No, I didn't think we were going to be doing all these things tonight, so.
You're on mute, Nick.
Yeah, no, I'm talking away, there's on mute. Well, maybe by the 1st of summer, maybe you could have an update would be like 1st of June or sometime in June, maybe?
I'm sure that would be great because by then we'll have the full-time person on board and that person will be acclimated and we'll have retraining done and I think we'll be in a totally different position. That's perfectly reasonable. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else? We've gone all through all 4 of the items. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Then thank you all very much. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.